Hello, hello. Welcome to Club Chicxulub. I'm Lauren C. Johnson, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Matt Carney and Bhat. Tonight we bring you wonders from the sea, the sky, the land of the immortal, and the land of the undead. Behold, Rita Chang-Eppig, who gives us a woman made of glass and circuit boards who arrives on the island of the world's last mortals. Rita also has a book that's available for pre-sale, so you might want to look it up. Edelson, and a lonely silver-suited extraterrestrial who can't quit making mistakes on planet Earth. Sumiko Saulson, and a beautiful hungry merman who teaches us that love may be unconditional, but relationships are not. Kathleen J. Woods, and a Selkie who is so tired of feeling like a child. Spencer Tierney's dueling superheroes who learn the hard way that strength will not always save you. Thaddeus Howze, the answer man himself, who's here to tell us about his friend Dracula and how perhaps there are some downsides to immortality after all. Club Chicxulub is a space to lament, to rage, to witness all that is happening around us each day, and ultimately spread hope by way of dark and weird fiction and music. Each of the stories you're about to hear tonight do exactly that. We know you'll love the tender, lonely, joyful, and downright delightful monsters these authors have created for you. And if you're able to, please leave a tip after the show. Sirocco the Raptor, and I will come around with this tip jar after, so if you have cash, please drop some cash into the jar. Everything that you donate, we will split amongst our performers. All right. And speaking of tips, please don't forget to tip your bartenders. We are so grateful to Angela Stas, the whole team at DecoDance, a proudly Ukrainian bar. Order food, beverages, and show your support. Finally, a big thanks to you, our audience, for co-creating this space with us. Let's raise a glass to DecoDance, to our performers, an artist, and to you. I will see you on the other side. Cheers.
The last to die. The morning the glass woman arrived on the island, all the security cameras blinked out at the same time. Surveillance drones swooned from the sky, tumbling softly onto genetically modified lawns that smelled like wildflowers grown in beakers of rain and cleaning fluid. Safety bots powered down mid-task in scandalous poses, legs akimbo, rears in the air. The last to die hardly knew what to make of the strange turn of events, having lived the past few decades under the around-the-clock care of these machines. Some of them feared that catastrophe had struck the outside world, from which they dwelled in relative isolation. Others barely noticed, their minds long ago having decomposed into yard waste, the synaptic branches cut, the nuclei withered like week-old rosebuds. Still others detected an opportunity for mischief and photographed themselves in mock conjugation with the safety bots or smeared lipstick onto smiles on their sheeny, vacant faces. The disturbance didn't last long. One by one, the machines reawakened to the sight of the strange woman whose carbon endoskeleton and neural circuitry were bare for all to see. She marched into the local office of the Bureau of Elder Affairs and up to the check-in console, accompanied by a dark-haired man in his mid to late 50s who neither spoke nor made eye contact with anyone. The screen flickered on. In a voice like a fork clinking against a champagne glass, she stated her request. In her home office on the mainland, Lanyu Montez, regional director of the Bureau of Elder Affairs, gaped. She had never seen a model like the glass woman's before. It was as though the factory had assembled her body, but forgotten the final steps of affixing the silicone skin and gluing on the wig. "I'm not sure I understand," she said to the glass woman. "You're looking for an apartment? On the island?" "I'm looking for a place where we can stay for the foreseeable future. Ideally with a small yard, but a large patio would be fine as well. Sound about right, Max?" Max just continued staring at the floor. He fluttered his fingers, perhaps in a show of assent. "But this isn't a rental market," Lanyu said. "It's all government-funded housing for the elderly, Ms." Lights on the glass woman's circuits twinkled, and suddenly she seemed to Lanyu something like a prehistoric god, a titan who had swallowed 1,000 fireflies. Lanyu wondered if her own insides looked like that. "Call me Beth," the glass woman said in a way that struck Lanyu distinctly as a lie. "It would mean a lot to me and Max if you would make an exception for us. His health has been deteriorating and he needs the doctors on the island, but I don't want to just abandon him here." Lanyu had been about to deny her request. Who knew what else this Beth was lying about? But at that moment, Max tilted his face to the light. Familiarity ghosted through Lanyu, and with that familiarity, the sense that she'd failed to grasp some eminently important fact. She might have dismissed it as déjà vu, except her mind was beyond such biological inefficiencies as déjà vu. "Give me a moment," Lanyu said. Lanyu snuffed her camera and mic with one hand so she could confer with her housekeeper, a robot programmed to say only, "Yes, indeed," and "Of course, ma'am," whom Lanyu had, for pretty much that reason, come to consider a therapist. "I know him from somewhere. Her too. Something about the way she speaks. I mean, what does appearance mean anyway when you can swap bodies on a whim?" "Indeed," the robot said. "So I should let them stay on the island for now, right? The smart thing to do is to keep them where I can observe them." "Yes. I know it's impulsive, but I've done great work for the Bureau and for the people of this island. I'm sure they'll respect my decision." Of course, ma'am. The last to die lived on islands around the world. How the idea to gather them on these islands had come about, no one could say. Perhaps the deathless simply grew weary of being reminded of the dying. After all, some of them still remembered a time when their own mortality hung about them like mosquitoes at a picnic. Then there were those who never knew frailty, who underwent the transfer procedure days after birth and came to consciousness in bodies liberated from hunger, cold, and skinned knees. Perhaps it was these cyborgs, or neo-humans as they like to call themselves, who first proposed moving the last to die to the islands, these new beings connected to the old ones in neither blood nor visage, only idea. News of the glass woman spread quickly among the island's inhabitants. Clarissa Polyakov threw a glass against her wall when she heard. It bounced and then rolled along her living room floor because, of course, real glass was too dangerous to keep around the last to die. She called her friends, a group of people who, for spiritual or other reasons, had refused cyberization. To comfort her, they brought over bottles of the finest red wines and tomes of pungent French cheeses, which they'd acquired for a steal because the deathless consumed no food or drink. They sat in a circle, retelling stories from their youth while the cheese stung their tongues and the wine patted their minds. They think they can just move in here, Clarissa said. The rest of the world is already theirs. Can't they leave us be on our little island? One of Clarissa's friends draped an arm around her. These cyborgs feel so entitled to everything, the friend said. But we're not going to let them ruin this place for us, too. Hums of agreement crowded the room. Most of Clarissa's friends had been relocated to this island, if not forcibly, then at least with great reluctance. The outside world had grown too dangerous too quickly for the human body. There were fewer and fewer doctors, themselves a dying breed, more and more engineers. Companies stopped insuring individuals who either couldn't or wouldn't be cyberized. Ambulances, if a particular city had them at all, took hours to arrive. Here were handrails and slip guards, sharp corners throttled with foam. Willow McNamara Farzad rooted through the boxes her daughter had dumped at her place before running off to research phytoplankton in the Amazon and found a pair of binoculars and a folding camping chair. Wheedling a neighbor into joining her, they set out for the more isolated northern tip of the island, where the Bureau of Elder Affairs had lodged the glass woman. Like whale watchers, the two of them sat with their binoculars a small distance from the farmhouse, passing back and forth baggies of peaches sliced by their robot housekeepers, slurping the tacky nectar from their fingers. They bragged about their children's accomplishments. World-renowned expert on microalgae, just made partner at top law firm dealing in cyber copyrights. Will your daughter come see you soon? Willow's friend asked. She's very busy, Willow said. Very, very busy. I'm glad she's putting her career first. Willow was, of course, lying. After a back surgery 9 months prior, while still loopy from the anesthesia, she'd confessed to the medbots her fear that she would die without getting another chance to see her daughter, who visited once every 5 to 6 years. I'm trying to stay hopeful, Willow said, sobbing, but maybe we're all just kidding ourselves. The medbots, unable to distinguish between emotional and physical pain, gave her a large dose of morphine. She fell asleep immediately, so that kind of solved that. If a single word existed to describe the state of the last to die, it would mean something akin to hopeful. They were on the island because, by the time the technology became available, their brains had atrophied too much for them to survive the transfer procedure. But how can this be? Willow had asked her doctor when he told her that she would be ineligible for cyberization. I eat well, exercise, and do crossword puzzles daily. My mind is as clear as it was when I was in my 30s. The doctor explained that what mattered was not the subjective experience of clarity, but the physical condition of the brain. The technology is getting better every day, he added, so at some point in the future they may figure out a way to cyberize older brains. Don't give up yet. People like Willow were hopeful because they had no alternative but to pray for another breakthrough to come along and save them from death. They were hopeful because sadness only further damaged the brain by increasing inflammation. And when an extra day potentially meant extra lifetimes, sadness was an emotion they dared not feel. After all, who among them didn't remember that headline from 30 years ago? The first generation to live forever. After decades of beta testing of dead subjects and subjects doomed to lie awake but immobile in their machine bodies, scientists had found a way to consistently digitize human consciousness. Once cyberized, the scientists crowed, "You are no longer tied to an aging, fragile body. You can have a new body, one that is stronger and more easily repaired. And should that new body break down, you can simply be downloaded into another body, as long as you have backed up all your data." Amidst the celebrations over this next human step, no one wanted to ruin the mood by stating the obvious. If there was to be a first generation to live forever, then it followed that there must be a last generation to die.
The Dweeb goes home. The Dweeb makes one more tweak with careful effort. The readout twinkles, the frequencies align. The word is good. The Dweeb receives the sign and squints up at the sky with desperate ardor. There's nothing left inside his pumping organ that he can use to pay the climbing price. If humble pie is all that's in the larder, he'll eat and thank the host and order twice. The stars look down and ask if he feels clever. He'll never volunteer again, not ever. Ty boarded the city bus on its last run of the night. He'd forgotten his student pass, but the driver seemed oblivious. No one from school was there to catch Ty pulling out a book. It was Moby Dick. 100 pages in, and still no whale. People got off and no one got on until Ty had his own giant limousine. He wasn't going home tonight, not to the couch in his mother's living room, where his mother's friend counted the money. A bench behind some station would be better. After a while, still no whale. Ty slumped and his eyelids drooped. Sunrise woke him. They were still moving. They were on a freeway. Ty lurched forward. The driver was sweating, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he saw Ty, he almost hit the concrete divider. A frickin' stowaway? Ty squinted at the driver's ID card. "Look, Bob?" said Ty. "I see you've got some issues. Just let me off, man." Bob slowed, but only briefly. He seemed a bit drunk. "You're the dealer," Bob said. "Oh, I see you on the corner. Your mother must be proud." "Don't talk about my mother," said Ty. His phone got no signal. Leaving by the emergency exit at this speed would not end well, but on reflection, why go back? Just to make another court date. Trees whipped by, so many trees. The air tasted clean. Eventually, they stopped for gas. While driver Bob filled up, Ty found some bushes to pee into. He was drawing a bead on a frog when he spotted someone peeking at him from inside the bus. A pudgy little dweeb in a silvery suit. Where had he come from? The dweeb, the extraterrestrial, to speak plainly, had stowed away on the last stop in the city. Driver Bob had hopped off his seemingly empty bus to pick up a few beers, and the creature seized the chance, squeezed between the folding doors, and then squeezed under a seat. This squeezability, his species was famed for it throughout the galaxy, had helped him survive, but human speech remained impenetrable. And although he liked human music, he wondered sometimes if the expedition had really needed an exomusicologist. The crew had despised him, perhaps disloyal thought. They'd marooned him deliberately. Sometimes he wanted to be caught, maybe given a hot meal, but no human authority seemed interested. Adults looked away as if embarrassed, or tossed him small metal discs of varying sizes. And his gear was failing. Only the bracelet and the signaler still worked. The bracelet had certain defensive uses, but the urban electromagnetic cloud stopped the signals. It had taken all his nerve to leave the city, its food scraps and warm grates. But from a quieter place, he might contact home. Driver Bob was inside paying for the gas when the bikers thundered up. They parked in a perfect row and strode in as if on a fashion runway featuring mostly skulls. Bob returned to the bus hastily and started the engine. Ty pointed at the dweeb. "You kidnap him, too?" Bob stared at the second stowaway. "How many of you are there?" said Bob. The dweeb made a chirping noise. Were his pupils actually red? "We've been kidnapped," Ty said to the dweeb. "Stop saying that," Bob yelled, and he put the bus in reverse and clipped a motorcycle. The inexorable ensuing domino effect brought the bikers boiling outside, pounding on the bus door. Unseen, the dweeb pressed a button on his bracelet, and the bus leapt away, slamming Bob and Ty against their seats. Bob reached frantically for the steering wheel, but the tires didn't even seem to be touching the asphalt. They came to a halt 5 minutes later at a diner. A nearby mileage marker suggested improbably that they had gone another 100 miles. The gas gauge still read full. There was nothing nearby but a swamp. A chicken crossed the road. They were the only customers. The waitress smiled at the dweeb. She herself had a handicapped child. After a few more beers to help him get over what had obviously been a hallucination, Driver Bob addressed the dweeb. "I don't suppose you ever been married?" Were those eyes purple now? He must be on something, thought the Bob, but how much trouble could a walking donut be? Ty, vacuuming up his meal, ignored them both. "We were going to retire," said Bob. "See the country." Then she got sick. She said, "When I'm gone, don't mope, do stuff." What good is stuff? Around and around I go, and finally last night I couldn't bear to drive back into the yard. At the counter, the manager had turned up a television. "In other news, a city bus hijacked by its driver. Company stated a poor performance appraisal." The manager looked at the bus. He looked at Bob. Bob got up and ran. Ty followed. The dweeb kept eating. "Are you done, dear?" the waitress asked doubtfully. The dweeb extended all his tongues and politely cleaned the plate. Then, even over the waitress's screams, he heard it, a signal from home. Ty chased the bus. "Sorry, kid," yelled Bob. He flung out some cash and was gone. Inside, while the manager comforted the waitress, the dweeb rotated the signaler and found the direction he must go. The manager clamped a hand on his shoulder. "How will you be paying, sir? Or ma'am?" The air crackled, and the manager spasmed and recoiled. The dweeb fled, wriggling under the back door. He had a feeling he'd dropped something, but the signaler was haranguing him. He wobbled on into the swamp. Ty saw what had been dropped, a bracelet with a kind of pointer and buttons. It didn't seem too girly, so he put it on, aimed at a trash can, and pressed a random button because it was red. Nothing seemed to happen. Then he heard the sirens, and he ran at skinny teenage boy speed and didn't see what the dishwasher saw when she came out on her cigarette break. A trash can turned to gold. Like everything else in town, pieces were already flaking off. The dweeb forged on, each step deeper in muck, but the signal was stronger now. Finally, chest deep, he was spent. He raised the signaler in supplication and saw the tan line where his bracelet had been. That would be another demerit. The policeman taking the report eyed the swamp. There had been talk of alligators. At least someone's cousin claimed to have seen one. Maybe not big, but still a gator, unless it was an iguana, but they have a nasty bite. He was reluctantly wading forward when the spaceship appeared. The manager, hand still numb, remembered it as round, pulsating, silver. The waitress swore it was like a rotating violet cigar. The dishwasher skipped town with the golden trash can, so no one got her opinion. The trucker who stopped for Ty a mile up the road was going cross-country, but insisted on having Moby Dick read aloud. "Beats listening to the news," he said. "They lie. You know, spaceships come here. They don't tell you that. The government doesn't tell you that." Nice bracelet. Driver Bob was caught 2 states over, waving a whiskey bottle and repeatedly pleading the 5th. The policeman, who hoped for promotion, never spoke of the muddy figure that rose in a beam of light, tear-stained face, beaming.
Shallow waters. In horror films, there's a moment when the audience knows our hero should run. We scream at the idiot looming large before us, hoisted high above, projected through celluloid and particles of light. Yelling at the movie, I don't notice the monster leaning against me for comfort. Nearby monsters are difficult to identify. A raised rash spreads over my shoulder where your head lay against me. Mold spreads outward, green and black tendrils where your fingers grasped mine. This isn't your fault. It cannot be helped. It's your species. Your kind taints anything it touches, consuming whatever it loves. Roaring rivers absorb their gently murmuring tributaries. The sweet song of soft waters trickling over time-worn stones gives way to the thundering rush of whitewater rapids and waterfalls. We are tributaries, draining inevitably into rivers. These shallow waters are our resting place. Here, a fallen branch breaks the surface of a pool, and lichen extends its fingers down into the water. There, algae floats in mossy patterns, and the air redolent with marigolds and eucalyptus. I wish we could stay here forever, hand in hand. But time moves forward, despite my best efforts. Tidal pools. Your skin is always clammy, and when you lay against me, you leech off the warmth from my skin. Holding you close, I feel you drain my energy. I grow tired and listless, but can't seem to walk away. I would generate more of my own heat if I could, you apologize, shrugging before you nestle your head in the crook of my arm. I was so isolated before I found you. If I wasn't lonely, I wouldn't find myself reaching out to you as much as I do. Don't worry about it, I say, moving down the couch a bit to give you room. Nobody's perfect. I don't have anything to give you, you sigh. Nothing but love, I say with a smile. Your needs are exhausting. Our world makes you sick. We say you drain us, but every day we poison you. We poison the entire aquatic system you come from and everything in it. Your fingers are moist and sticky against the palm of my hand. The taste of your mouth salty and warm. Your gills pulsate a slowly, steady, sleepy rhythm on my shoulder. I feel your breath against mine. Soon you are asleep in my arms. Every time I look at you, you seem as naked as you were the day I found you. I could see right through you, your translucent aqua skin shimmering over taut, stretched sinew and worried muscles. I witnessed your heart plainly visible under your cool, damp flesh. It pumped out the rhythm of your life, pressing fluids into a network of hungry veins and capillaries. Your blood flows through your body like water. You are fluid. I am set. Ripples. You are all easy affection and vanity. You are tender and broken and remind me of my cat. If I pet you too long, if you pet her too long, she might bite you. She's getting on my nerves, so I ignore her. After a while, she comes back around, butting my hand with her head. She's pushy and demanding and aware of her needs. She's very possessive, and so are you. I am her human, but she can't tell me what to do, and you aren't gonna run me either. I can't let you hurt me. I see how you are. You taste so good, you told me, your cheek resting against my inner thigh. I look down at you smiling. Sex is a thing that bonds us together. Humans aren't the only creatures who pair bond, entwined in the embrace of passion, rushing pulse, ancient longing, exhausted bodies tumbling into cool, sweat-moistened blankets. The heady rush of it so intoxicating that I can't think of any practical thing. I should have been born out in the Pacific, you pout, curling up in the outer corner of the passenger seat, your still wet hair pressed against the foggy window. I don't know what my mother was thinking, birthing me in the San Pablo Bay. Nothing good ever happens in Hercules, in or out of the water. Would you like a can of sardines? I ask helpfully. Mermen don't only eat seafood, you know, you answered, rolling your eyes. Why don't you take me to Jack in the Box? If I'd known more about your species, I wouldn't have been surprised when you began to take over the bedroom with your molding spores. I had to give up the bathtub entirely. 3 weeks into our relationship, you filled it with warm water and Epsom salt. As you bathed, your scales slowed off into the mixture until it became some kind of brackish soup. Quite frankly, it stank. It smelled like a warm tuna sandwich baking on top of an uncleaned aquarium. What do you expect me to do now? I fumed. I have a job, you know. Am I supposed to sponge off in the sink? I can't help it, you mumbled, looking down at your webbed toes. Most people can't really take me at my worst, but I can't help it. I need this in order to live. If it's too much for you to deal with, I can always go down to Mare Island Strait and live in the shallows near the river by the pier, and I don't want to be an inconvenience to you. So you're saying that you don't have a choice, I sputtered, wandering off to the kitchen to make a sandwich. I can't even deal with this right now. Do you want bagels and lox? Oh, wait, I don't want to be culturally insensitive. You eat more than seafood, right? What about a peanut butter and jelly? Lox and a bagel are fine, you whisper, smiling agreeably. You look like a puppy after it's been struck with a rolled up newspaper, nervous and anxious to please me. Later, I create an almost religious arrangement of cardboard automobile fresheners to mask the odor. I spray endless cans of Febreze. I engage a Glade plug-in to cover it all up with artificial sea breeze. Raw sturgeon. At first, I was flushed with anger in the wake of your betrayal. Now the anger has subsided. I relent. I need to accept you as you are. You can't be someone you aren't. Love may be unconditional, but relationships aren't. Relationships are very conditional. I step back from you for my own protection. I love you, but you cannot be trusted. How could you bring that thing into my home? I ask. A half-eaten white sturgeon, as long as I am tall, is bleeding out onto my formerly cream-colored living room carpet. You are staring at me with the confused eyes of a cat being chastised for dragging a dead squirrel into the kitchen. You know I'm angry, but you have no idea what you did wrong. I'm sorry, you offer uncertainly, curling up tightly to make your body look as small and innocent as possible. Your slate gray skin is starting to dry from exposure, but I'm angry, so I can't let you go loll in the tub. Your emerald eyes, flecked with gold, are glowing, moist around the edges with unexpressed tears. It's hard to stay angry with you, but I've got to lay down the law. My landlord won't want us living here at all if you keep this up, I say, frowning. The drying fish guts smell like a crab shack at Fisherman's Wharf on the hottest day of summer. Undeterred, you nervously pick at the fish with your fingers, shoveling clumps of pink fish intestines into your mouth. I'll clean it up, you say anxiously. Please don't be angry with me. I didn't mean to get you in any trouble. Put it in the freezer, I say icily, glaring at you. But I hate frozen fish, you protest. Then keep it out in the marina next time, I yell. You can't have it in here. You nod and fish a garbage bag out of the kitchen drawer. I watch impassively as you pack the stinking carcass into the thick plastic bag and carry it out to the straight. After you leave, I get down on my hands and knees with a bucket of soapy water and scrub brush, cleaning the bloodstains out of the carpet. I'm shaking my head, crying into the stinking wash rag at regular intervals. If you can't understand what it takes to live indoors, how can we make this thing work? You return, stinking of raw fish and brackish water. I was about to yell at you, but you sat on the floor beside me and took my foot in your hand, massaging it. I can paint your toenails later, you say, kneading the flesh of my soul and heel between your elegant fingers. I quickly relent. I'm so bad at saying no to you. You drag in a new plush throw rug that afternoon and hide the mess beneath it. Soon we are both relaxed on a caftan, ignoring the stain and the stench, the way we ignore everything else that's wrong with this relationship.
My sister is learning to swim. Has been swimming this time for 4 days. Now 4 nights. My mother stands at the window, gazing across the highway to the ocean. The dunes obscure our view. She'll come back, I say. My mother nods, rakes her fingers through my hair, and descends our creaking stairs to our pub. From the apartment, I watch the usual men smoking on the sidewalk, their cigarettes glowing in the summer fog, the sunset stubborn chill. My mother's fingers left my hair tangled. I smooth it out, braid it slowly. Below, someone breaks a glass. Mine to sweep. It is also my job to clean, to wipe the rings, staining the tables, bitter froth gathered in the curses, carved names. I serve fish and chips, refill bottles of malt vinegar, and hear those old red-faced men call me too fair to belong to my mother. What sort of ghost man must I come from? The men like my mother's dark eyes, her rich hair, and most of all they like the way her voice lilts when she deigns to use it. Their brogues thicken over their pints between each other. They repeat their stories of how they came here and when, young again, in some past when the neighborhood was all Irish. She's a saint, she is then, my mother. Keeping open while the other, that and there go closing. A tap bursts and my mother curses in her strange Irish, a dialect that makes them squint. Where on earth do you come from, sounding like that? Some island of the islands they dream of. They're siren, they say. My mother laughs and pours. She looks past me towards the door, but my sister always comes back. As for my father, let them believe that she buried and mourns him. How else to explain what he stole? In private, she tells another story, warns my sister and me that we must not repeat her mistake, trusting a man, to stay tender after, to sleep the whole night enfolding her human limbs in his, pleasure enough to justify shedding the seal skin from her back. My mother's pelt had been supple and dark. Beautiful, she hums, and I do believe her. She had never guessed a human man capable of leaving. Hadn't understood she really could be stuck the wrong way, with long freckled arms and 2 breasts bruised by twins. She says we were born in the bathtub, details the viscera, the 3 of us keening. She sighs, mouths to feed, and no family to swim back to, not in these absurd bodies. The wrong body, the wrong life, but we're worth it. My lovely mother, who lies. Tonight, one of the men is young, and he watches me. I don't recognize him. He sits with the leg folded beneath him like a little boy and smiles at me as I wipe grease on my apron. I forget to serve him his fries. Feet aching, I dip outside, light a cigarette. The first I've ever bought for myself. How I've celebrated turning 18, a grown-up secret, a shame I chose. The end clatters down the hill to its last stop, curling under those stone steps that lead to the highway, the beach. At the top of the hill, through the fog, my sister's shadow. Evelyn, unmistakable, tiny even in the bulk of her black pelt draped over her shoulders. She sings out, "Hello." I don't mean to hiss. Someone's going to see it. I touched the Atlantic, she says. Swam through Panama, and next time I'll be even stronger. She stares at me double, eyes, oil eyes, and drooping sockets. I almost made it home. You live here. I sleep here, Evelyn says, squeezing my shoulder, all pity. You look stupid with that smoke. She ignores the pub, takes the side door upstairs to her bed, and I inhale, swallow, cough, inhale again. A patch of ice plant serves as our garden, and I break off a stalk, write my name in the sidewalk, grinding the succulent down to its nub, scraping my fingernails. We drew flowers as girls. I watch the letters disintegrate and imagine Evelyn upstairs, locking her pelt in her trunk, slipping the keys into her sand dollar on her nightstand, safe from her poor human sister. How my mother instructs her to hide things, so sure of all I can't know. Evelyn plays music to keep the bar noise from her dreams. Roy Orbison wails and breathes slow and heavy, sleep again, then swim again, days and days. There is a dust on her nightstand because she never cleans anything. The sand dollar is wide, its belly cratered. The key slides into my palm. The trunk is clumsier, and I hold my breath as I drag it over the carpet. Inside her sealskin, damp and wrinkled and dead, softer than anything I'd ever imagined. I lift it and see floral paper curling over a gap in the trunk's bottom. I hook my fingers into the crack and pull it away. Pull away a panel of wood. Beneath, another pelt. I raise this one high, let it unfurl to its full length, tall, like my mother, like me. Outside, it's grown colder. I pile my jeans onto the sand, my shirt, my underwear. This long pelt is stiff in my hands and I feel it will crack. That is too old, older than I am. But no, it softens as I step into the flippers. It oils. My legs and arms shorten quickly, my chest constricts. I pull away, but the pelt has already closed over my face. I am very warm. I pant and watch my whiskers quiver. I have not placed myself close enough to the water, and now I must flap over the sand on my new belly. I see little grace in this. The skin fits poorly, like a sleeping bag, a hand-me-down sweater, and I am so tired of feeling like a child. In the water, I improve. I am nearly fast and sleek in this bullet body. I count 10 seconds, 30. Seaweed tickles my fins and I am giddy, vibrating with happiness, and this must be why the skin cannot hold me. The reason I swim for 1 minute before the face peels away from my face, eye sockets slipping through my nose. I have feet again, lost in sagging flippers. I struggle to the surface. I am, after all, inexperienced. Another good reason. I swim sideways against the current and let the waves push me to shore. I collapse on the beach, gasping, and the skin lies beside me, its empty face staring into mine. Smiling, shining, and I can only almost see my reflection, more than a shadow in this pelt. So clearly now, oh, I see it. Myself. What is mine?
Superman vs. Hercules, the Nonviolent TV series. 1. The all-American superhero and Greek demigod grabbed hands with elbows pressed against a park chessboard table. A referee slapped the table and cried, "Begin." Their veins bulged like subway maps, then slowed and froze in place. They grunted and didn't blink. Crowds in person and online began to yawn. "I can sleep like this," Hercules said, the wind catching his golden locks. "I'm already dreaming," Superman fired back. Hot takes fired like neurons across the web. "Can I sleep to this?" ran one headline. Memes mocked the TV studio responsible for this God-adjacent reality competition show, and its premise of no hand-to-hand fighting. The studio had sole rights to both superhumans, body and spirit, but no budget to cover citywide damages. At the 10-minute mark of watching two statues, a figure in the crowd threw green powder at them. Superman coughed and Hercules slammed to victory, nearly breaking his competitor's fingers. Figuratively speaking, neither of them could get injured or die according to their contracts. Bored already, Hercules started a new game. He lifted a giant boulder over his head and said, "Rock, paper, scissors!" Someone yelled, "Cut!" And the showrunner later announced that all future episodes would have no live audience. 2. The two muscle kingdoms stood at opposing podiums in a Colosseum-shaped auditorium. The moderator read the first prompt of the debates. Would the world be better without superheroes? Superman argued, yes, we play a role in creating unrealistic expectations on mothers and healthcare workers when we call them heroes. Hercules interjected, no, we literally save the world more than anyone else. Superman spat out that superheroes destroy more than they save. Their quips grew faster and faster until they spoke each word at 1/200th of a second, the maximum speed that birds can discern different sounds. When the female moderator attempted to bring back order, the men set a world record for the most times interrupting a woman in a single minute. Reply guys on Twitter cheered. Neither won the debate. 3. With land deeds in hand, the power men had 1 week to evict tenants from a rent-controlled apartment complex. Whoever ruined the most tenants' lives won. Although the show phrased the challenge as, whoever better prepared the space for new residents won. Superman read up on police tactics. He relied on X-ray inspections to find illegal substances, or supposedly illegal substances, and hired lawyers to seize property arbitrarily. Hercules shook the pillars of the underground parking structure to create small earthquakes to scare folks. Local government officials threatened legal action against the TV studio halfway through the week, so the episode got cut early. The internet claimed Superman had been ahead. 4. The camera opened on Superman and Hercules barefoot in the soil of northern Brazil's Amazon rainforest. They muscled their way through barren fields, planting seeds with flicks of the wrist faster than casino blackjack dealers. Carbon offsets like planting more trees will save our planet, Superman read from a teleprompter, most likely. Scores of scientists tweeted out links to reports that stressed how reforestation was not a clear-cut solution to climate change. Tree huggers for life, Hercules joked to fill one of the long silences. A shot of them throwing dirt at each other and laughing ended abruptly as if it shouldn't have been in the final edits. In an unexplained pivot mid-episode, the show featured the super celebrities at understaffed American hospitals visiting the sick. Crew on set leaked to the public how they waited hours for the duo to show up at each hospital, only for them to pose for several politician seconds. Hercules looked more sexy, standing at bedsides with his golden tan skin, so magazines with his cover image sold out before Superman's. Scientists pointed out that all print editions of the magazines equal the number of trees that had been planted, making this episode carbon neutral. 5. The writers on the show went on strike, as the TV studio kept demanding inhumane hours and contradictory directions for the talent. Confused, Superman and Hercules went largely unscripted. They tried out-drinking, then out-vomiting each other. On long nights, Superman and Hercules went shot for shot, pint for pint, in high-end clubs, dive bars, house parties, in the US, in Greece, anywhere. The TV studio hated paying all the bills, but at least alcohol misuse was covered in the talent's health insurance plans. Only Hercules enjoyed this episode since he could get drunk. He even peed alongside a statue of himself peeing from the 2nd century CE. I can barely feel this, he said, forming a river. I feel for you, Superman said. He rolled his eyes before returning his gaze to Hercules' naked chest and below. 6. Given unreconcilable differences and waning viewership, the TV studio's board fired most top brass from the show right before the finale's release. With new creative freedom, the writers and crew remade the episode and leaked it online. Superman and Hercules faced each other in chairs, eyes closed, in an empty desert. When the men's eyes opened, a timer began. In between shots of a stony staring contest, a committee of therapists introduced themselves as the judges to the last challenge. We're open to anything happening, one said, smiling. At the hour mark, a ring of explosives burst around the competitors and sent them into a hole. Mystic vipers slithered in, and instead of hissing, spoke with the voices of the two men's long-dead fathers, yelling how worthless they were. So they ate the vipers. letting out burps that sounded like their father's screams. Hercules almost choked. Superman saved him, but the Greek hero spat out that he could have saved himself. Your strength won't always save you, Superman said. Neither will yours. Hercules shoved his hand down Superman's throat and pulled out 3 cemeteries. Unfazed, he knelt down and put flowers on the graves of those the Man of Steel loved and lost, Lois Lane, his parents of Krypton, and of Earth. I honor your dead better than you, Hercules hissed. Not a chance, his companion replied. Superman reached into Hercules' mouth and temples emerged, those of his parents, Zeus and Alcmene, and godly siblings. Superman quickly gave his respects. At a loss for words, they switched to visuals. Superman used heat vision to draw Krypton in its final moments of existence, the home he never knew. Hercules painted a vase depicting his last lover, Deianira, killing him with a poison she had been told was a love potion. She had lost faith in his love and wanted a way back to him. At a loss for visuals, they simply looked at each other. A long look that the cameras had no patience to capture completely. The therapist judges could not determine the winner. The weight of their losses scored point values beyond their metrics. The cameras returned to the 2 men, sobbing and hugging each other. The crew yelled out that the first to break the hug would be the loser, but overhearing them, the 2 flew until they became dots against the blue sky. Hercules' mic picked up the last audio. No competition, but I'm the better kisser.
Dracula's cat, Persephone. I am sure there'd be days that Dracula would have to sleep in the basement in the same room as his coffin, but not able to get into his coffin. Why? Because his cat is already there. Dracula does have a cat. Its name is Persephone, after the goddess of the underworld. And there are days when Dracula does sleep outside his coffin. This was due to a problem he meant to fix some time ago and hadn't gotten around to it. All he had to do was apologize. I like to think it was the last time Dracula experienced anything close to being human. Now, as you may know, Dracula is a vampire, and depending on whom you ask, he's a legendary figure with plenty of stories told about him. Some of them are not true, or so he tells me. One night after carousing, he stops in a bar and sat down next to me. He was already quite drunk and introduced himself casually. I assumed he was another goth, fetishist with a thing for capes, until he smiled. He had abnormally large canines and eyes which stared into my soul. I slid back on my bar stool without even realizing I'd done it. Vlad Dracula at your service. He waved his hand to the bartender and a libation appeared momentarily. No words were spoken. He was evidently a regular. It was the same beer I was drinking. Without much ado, he mentioned one of the things he didn't get to have a lot of were friends. He admitted, people take the whole, you might be dinner one night if I'm particularly peckish thing very seriously. I relate to that perspective, frankly. He also revealed he was never invited to dinner parties. You eat one groom at one wedding and people never shut up about it. Anyway, Vlad told me he'd been alone for centuries. A dalliance here, outliving 6 or 7 wives or husbands over the years, more than he could count. They just get boring. They start saying the same thing over and over. Why don't you love me? If you loved me, you'd make me a vampire. Why won't you do this one thing for me? But Dracula knew what would happen. He'd made this mistake several times. He would turn them. He would give them the dark gift. And as soon as they got it, they'd think they'd pulled something over on old Vlad, as if he hadn't been aware of their goal of getting the gift and leaving him behind. Most bound out the door before they even learn what the gift really means. I mean, besides that superhuman vitality, boundless strength, shape-changing, controlling various forms of vermin, okay, that's a mixed blessing. But it's great for clearing apartments of insect pests, he whispers conspiratorially. He looks down at the drink he bought but hadn't touched. And there's already alcohol in his breath, but I don't stop to wonder how it got there. He goes on to tell me his loved one is usually back in about 3 days. He can set his watch by it. No one had ever lasted longer. It is pathetic when they return, sniveling and whining about their pleasures lost, the transformed state, the turning of their flesh to living ice, the hunger, oh, the hunger for the living. He looked positively distraught over their plight. Apparently, Dracula is many things, but he is not a monster. After he saw the first 3 or 4 responded and the actions he was forced to take to maintain his secrecy, he vowed to never do it again to a person. Which is how we got to the point where he mentions his cat. Dracula has a cat. Of course he does. Lonely for companionship, but not wanting a lot of maintenance, Dracula found a kitten, a bit standoffish, but curious enough. He adopted him in the evening when the winter sun dips early. The lady at the pound was nice. She reminded Dracula of a woman in his village 200 years ago. He spared her for her kindness. That rude young man kicking the dogs behind the building on the dog walk was not so lucky. Remember, folks, mind your manners. You never know who or what is watching you. Dracula took the kitten home, and the two grew to become fast friends. Both night owls, they'd scamper through the early evening right after sunset, feasting on voles and joggers alike. And come the morning, when the two were done with their patrol, they'd come home. Dracula would retire to his coffin, and his beloved cat would generally prefer to sit on the top rather than in there with Dracula. They agreed it was best after the accident. One night he closed her in with him. She snuggled closely and seemed content. But when she woke and was unable to escape, she panicked and tried to wake Vlad, unsuccessfully. He sleeps like the dead after all. Dracula woke covered in crazed scratches as she tore through the enclosed space for hours, waiting for him to get up. She didn't speak to him for a week. No hunting, no patrols, no joggers, nothing. She disappeared. She reappeared a week later and nothing was said of the event, but no apologies were made. They were together for the rest of her life, but near the end, 25 years after he found her in a pound in Brooklyn, she was dying. And he was beside himself. This was his soulmate. Even enhancing her abilities with a drop of his blood here or there would not stop the Grim Reaper from his eventual harvest. She grew slower, weaker. It had been years since she'd been able to take down a jogger on her own. Dracula realized he couldn't live without her. In a moment of weakness, he did what he promised never to do again. He slit the vein near his wrist with his diamond-sharp nail. Forgive an old man his selfish indulgences, my sweet Persephone. The dark gift swept into her. Her age fell away in hours. Her breathing eased, then stopped, and then started again, slower, colder, darker. Her eyes popped open. That baleful glare caught Dracula off guard. She was pissed. Dracula reached out his hand, and her guttural growl was the one she used when she was preparing to take down a particularly large jogger on a mountain pass. Dracula wisely withdrew his hand. Most days, their relationship is good. They do all the things they used to do when she was younger and still alive. They take strolls in the park, stop and listen to jazz in the evening. Persephone rides on Dracula's shoulder, more shadow than cat, and women gaze at her as Dracula takes his pick of her admirers. The two of them are so much more together than they ever were separately. Yet some nights, Persephone resents her state, her unending beauty, her wait for a death that will never come. It feels unnatural. It's a wrongness unbearable. And on those nights, especially those nights, Dracula wisely sleeps on the floor of his tomb, while Persephone stares from his coffin, her frustration seeking an outlet. Dracula tells me this story, slowly sobering up. He slides that beer over to me, having never touched it. Suddenly, I felt a shadow sliding up my leg, and a pair of green, glowing eyes appeared on the bar right in front of me. No one else seemed to see it but me. Dracula stands up, smiles that terribly toothy grin, and invites Persephone onto his arm, and she glides up to his shoulder and settles in. You should probably head home and never come back here. This is one of Persephone's favorite hunting spots. Mine, too. If you'll excuse me, I spotted something interesting. It appears the bouncers were breaking up a fight, and Vlad escorted the man to the exit at the back of the nightclub. He was gone for just a moment and then returned with a bit of lightness in his step. I finished my beer and watched Dracula, Lord of the Vampires, dancing in a nightclub with Black Cat on his shoulder that nobody else seemed to notice. She turned her gaze toward me, her brilliant green eyes flashing in the club lights. She disappeared from Vlad's shoulder. I dropped a 20 on the bar and ran out the door. When I got to my car, I discovered all 4 tires were flat. I waved for a taxi and one pulled up. And as I opened the door, Vlad Dracula appeared over my shoulder, appearing to tower, whispering, "She's giving you a head start. She loves to play with her food." He slams the car door and tells the driver where to drop me off. It was only as the driver pulled away that I realized he knew my address. As the car pulled away, I heard a voice in my head. "I hope you make it. I think we could be friends."
Thank you so much to our fabulous, fabulous performers. Give it up for Rita Chang-Eppig, the last to die. Eve Edelson, the Dweeb goes home. Sumiko Saulson, Shallow Waters. Kathleen J. Wood, Salt Mother. Spencer Tierney, Superman vs. Hercules, the Nonviolent TV series. Thaddeus Howze, Dracula's Cat. With original music by Bhat, the Shipwreck Detective. I'm Lauren C. Johnson, with my co-host Dev and Matt Carney.
Thank y'all for coming out. So, one other thing, tip your performers. This was amazing, and we pass all those tips on to them, as well as DecoDance, so please buy a drink because we love them. One other thing, please see us again at Lit Crawl. We will be at Lit Crawl this year. 4 people, 2 returning heroes, and one of them is right there. Leanne Perry will be reading with us. Lauren Parker, Kate Folk, Johanka Delgado. So please join us for Lit Crawl. This is Club Chicxulub. I love you all. Thank you so much.